for New York and sending a message to the nation.
Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Dan Clark. Democrats rallied virtually this week to nominate former Vice President Joe Biden as the party's candidate for president. And one of those Democrats was Governor Andrew Cuomo, who delivered a pre-taped speech on the first night of the DNC. He spent a lot of those remarks criticizing the federal response to the COVID-19 crisis.
And our current federal government is dysfunctional and incompetent. It couldn't fight off the virus. In fact, it didn't even see it coming.
More on that in a few minutes, but first, back in Albany, lawmakers again called for a new investigation into the state's handling of nursing homes during COVID-19. They held a press conference on a new bill this week that would form a new commission to probe nursing homes. The legislature would form the commission, and it would have the power to subpoena state officials and gather information. The goal here would be to prepare for a potential second wave of the virus. It's largely supported by Republicans, but some Democrats support the bill as well.
We need everything, and the governor knows that, and this administration knows that. And instead of sharing all that information, instead of being self-accountable, I think they are more concerned about reducing any criticism into partisan attacks and blaming others instead of being fully accountable of what happened for the last 5 months.
Bernadette Hogan was at that press conference and is with me now in studio. Bernadette, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So what did you think about this press conference? Because it seems like I've heard this story before. We want an independent probe of the nursing home stuff. Is this going anywhere? This bill that would establish a commission to investigate this.
Right. So of course there's been pushes to have an independent review of how the Cuomo administration and the State Department of Health handled the COVID-19 crisis in nursing homes. And the governor's argument is that there's already been a review. Congress has done one. The state legislature also held 2 hearings on this. It's done. Also, the fact that the state health department produced a report, which critics say this was an internal review of your own policies.
Right.
So it was interesting yesterday, though, because it was headed by Republicans, but then also Democrats. The bill is sponsored by Assemblyman Ron Kim, who's a Democrat, and he's been an advocate of the nursing homes, et cetera, and their families throughout this entire thing. But what makes this different is that they want to create a commission, which the state has done multiple times before.
Oh my God, they love creating commissions.
Right. And the fact that there's no gubernatorial appointment on this commission, it would be headed by someone from the State Attorney General's office, selected by the State Attorney General's office, and then also members that are chosen by the majority and minority councils or conferences of both the Senate and the Assembly. So we'll see.
If I was a betting man, I would say it's not going to pass, but anything can happen. It's Albany.
You never know. You never know. It depends.
Let's move on to the governor's DNC speech. Well, first let's talk about his book. So he announced this week that he's going to publish a book. Apparently he wrote it himself. I have not heard one nice thing about this book, and I don't know what you've seen.
Right. So the governor hinted about this a couple weeks ago, and then within the past couple days, he said that we've seen it online that there's going to be a book release in October. And critics have said, well, aren't we still in the middle of a pandemic? Why did you and where did you find the time to write this book? And the governor yesterday on the radio defended it, and he said, well, it's not a history of COVID. It's more or less lessons that were learned during the crisis and then, of course, going forward. So he won't say how much of an advance he got, where the money's going to go. He did say a portion of it will get donated to a COVID-related entity, but he did not specify where.
Yeah, really interesting to me that he is one who has advocated very strongly for the president to reveal his tax returns publicly, but is not willing to say how much money he's getting from this book. So we won't know that until April. So really interesting to see that. His speech on Monday, we were all waiting for it in the LCA, the reporters in the Capitol. This had the potential, when we were first talking about it like a week ago, to be like his father's 1984 speech, really like elevate his figure even more than it already was. but he only got 5 minutes, so I think that was a detriment to him. What did you think of the speech?
Right, so well, the governor got 5 minutes, but 5 minutes compared to other speakers who got 2 to 3. So the 5-minute allotment actually was a considerable amount of time, especially considering the governor has gotten a lot of notoriety with how he's handled the COVID-19 crisis, et cetera, the legacy of the daily press briefings you and I were both at. But the governor had been saying he was worried about getting compared to his father because his father had such a momentous and, of course, you know, that speech people still talk about.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he said he was feeling pressure, and this is something that he does talk about quite a bit, being compared to his father. But, you know, the speech really, from my point of view, it was a lot of what we've already seen and heard in the daily press briefings, just now it was shortened into 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, because we watched him every day for 100 or so days, it was a lot of the same stuff that we've heard. But for people that are watching around the country, they didn't really, I think there was almost like an inside joke to it. He started out with, it's day 100 and X,
Right.
it's Monday. And that's all the stuff that he said at the briefings.
Right. He made something, he was making kind of like inside jokes that if you were following it day to day like we were, then you would understand it. But then on a national scale, I don't know if people were getting confused. And then he was also utilizing COVID-19 as a metaphor for the national picture and defeating Donald Trump, as the Democrats are hoping to do. So that was also, that play on words is something that he's been talking about, but I don't know how that translated to a national audience.
Me neither. I guess we'll have to find out. Bernadette Hogan from the New York Post, thanks so much.
Thanks.